When was the last time a child's reaction caught you completely off guard?
This morning.
hmm If you're thinking of a specific moment, you are exactly who this podcast is for. Welcome to Big Feelings Real Caregiving from toddlers to teens. We're exploring the gap between what caregivers expect and what children actually deliver across different ages.
And we're not just talking to parents. We also mean coaches, mentors, teachers, anyone involved in the development of children.
That's right, because, caregiving takes a whole village.
hmm
There are so many types of caregivers, and each one is important. I'm Dr. Sandy Chifulius. I'm a psychologist by training. I'm a researcher, and I teach graduate students how to be school psychologists. I've been doing this work for a really long time, and I've been most excited about being co-creator of Feel Your Best Self.
And I'm Dr. Jess Kozlowski. I taught special education for 10 years and now research the best ways of supporting children and adolescents' social, emotional, and behavioral development.
And most importantly, we're both moms. I think we were calculating it the other day, and I think we basically have, across the two of us, close to a century of combined parenting experience. I have 3 kids in their 20s.
And I have 2 under 10.
So between us, believe me, we've pretty much seen it all, either as a mom, a coach, a teacher, or as a school psychologist.
And we certainly don't have all the answers, but we're here to talk it through with you.
That's right. And that's why we're using the Feel Your Best Self framework to help us talk through this podcast. That's actually what we built FYBS for. Although we started with kids as our frame, it's actually for everyone and anyone to help you think about recognizing, reflecting, and responding to all those big feelings that come your way in all different ages and spaces. So as we turn our focus to adults and specifically caregivers, our bottom line message is that nobody warned us. So we're starting right there as we explore.
And we decided to use a consistent 3-2-1 structure for this podcast. Each time we'll discuss 3 big ideas, take 2 questions from the audience, that's you, and 1 takeaway to feel your best self.
So let's dive in, Jess.
Let's do it.
You ready? Okay, so where do we start? I think for idea 1, we should set the foundation by understanding the developing emotion system. Why is it that the same kid feels like a stranger at every stage? Like, why do we think in all these parenting advice and handbooks out there that, when you're only in toddlers, that's only you think about? It's like a whole life we need to be actually considering, because otherwise you totally get blindsided as a caregiver by a kid's emotions. So it is the long game, not just the short game. And it's hard to think about when you're in the thick of those temper tantrums.
Absolutely.
Or the eye-rolling teenager, right? So to start, like in emotions, it's hard. It's a good idea to start thinking about how we look at it across a continuum from having no ability to regulate our emotions to becoming independent, which is your goal as an adult. And so if we start with infancy or toddlerhood, you have to consider the fact that their systems are fully externally regulated.
Yes.
Emotions run everything. Developmentally, their brain isn't ready to control anything, and it's so exhausting. But, they can't reason with a meltdown, or you can't. So that's why in the younger ages, we often hear about the word co-regulation and why it's so important that adults learn how to do it. But when we say co-regulation, what it really means is that it's how we are reacting to how they're acting, right, Jess?
Absolutely.
So think about it. You're lending them, because they don't have it, you're lending them your emotion regulation ability, your way of responding, because they don't have that. So in these stages, that's why they talk about, give it a beat, get down to their level, don't demand, give time when we change transitions and different activities, or we talk about making sure we do this like the peekaboo as a serve and return to give warmth. Okay, so let's move to preschool. Love preschool because this is where we start to see language entering for the first time, like emotion language, and it's called what we would consider the great naming project. We learn to build that vocabulary in the calm moments. And we're learning more and more about why it's important to name feelings. It's not just nice to have. It's a foundation. There was a great study recently, a couple of years ago in child development, where the key takeaway was that emotion regulation predicts your brain skills related to how you plan, focus, remember, all that great stuff that you need as a grown up. It's not the other way around. You really need to set those emotions up first.
Wow, what an incredible skill to share with our children. And so, thinking about what this looks like at that age,
Hmm.
we can think about putting visuals at kids' levels. So maybe the feelings forecast that kids can go to begin to build that familiarity with different emotional expressions and words to describe those emotions.
Starting with really simple clouds, right? That's why we use the
Oh,
clouds. Just being
absolutely.
stormy, sunny, or so-so. That's all you need to know. You don't
Yeah,
need the fancy words yet.
right. And they're not ready for those yet. Um, but here we can't stress enough the importance of co regulation. The calmer the adult is able to stay, the quicker the meltdown is going to end. They're really learning from your modeling.
Totally. And it's not like that's easy, right?
Of course not.
And we all have our limits. Like for me, again, my kids are in their 20s, but I clearly remember the younger ages and how I could not go to the grocery store with my kids.
Mm,
It was something I couldn't handle. My spouse could tune out
all the
the
sounds.
screams and the
Yeah.
whines and the demands and all that other stuff, but I just couldn't. So that was my thing, and that was my limit for sure. So, Jess, what does this look like now in middle childhood, right?
Sure. So, middle child is when children really start to internalize social rules. They're looking around to their peers and to adults to figure out, what is socially acceptable? How are others reacting to these situations?
Mm.
But
Yep.
of course, we're going to see skill gaps here. What kids see happening isn't necessarily what they're yet able to do. And so, as much as we can provide opportunities for unstructured play and allowing them to experience some discomfort um, with that unstructuredness, they're going to encounter situations where they get to practice emotion regulation. We also want to try to limit devices when we can, again, because that's not allowing for that unstructured time to navigate these various situations.
Hmm.
And consistent rules, that is absolutely going to help um, children understand what's expected of them and then to work through their emotions around those expectations.
So, how do you do that as a caregiver? How do you stay regulated? You have a
Well,
story? Yeah.
sure. I really try to take a moment before I respond
Mm.
to decide, what's going to help this situation. Just recently, my daughter was, going to bed and, she started to get a little upset and then said, "You made me cry." And I thought to myself, interesting. Not sure how I made you cry, but I really don't have anything to say that's going to help this situation. It's just, she's just going to react, in a way that's going to escalate this. And so I just stayed silent. I literally just sat there and stayed
Were you biting
silent.
your tongue?
I had some thoughts in my head, but she worked through it herself. And in a minute or two, she had stopped crying and was, putting herself to sleep. So, certainly confused by myself
Hmm.
about how I made her cry. But again, taking that moment to recognize, you know, I don't need to win this conversation and it's not going to help.
Good for you, because I probably would have bit my tongue and said, "You made me cry," actually, but that's good. All right, yeah. So I think it is those pauses. So, speaking of pauses and holding it all together, that
Hmm.
brings us really to adolescence, and here we have the limbic gas pedal outpacing that prefrontal brakes, like the reasoning part. Teens might know better, but they still act on the emotional signal, and you just have to hang on for the ride as they're
Hmm.
learning to drive, right? Um, because it is really important that you're still there. There was a brand new paper in the journal Children and Youth Services Review, and it looked at what are the actors that contribute to life satisfaction among U.S. teens, and it really made me feel better as as I've
Okay.
been hanging in there with my own teens. Is that teenagers, with peer support, are twice as likely to have high versus low life satisfaction.
Okay.
But teenagers with parent support were 8 times as likely
Wow.
compared to those that didn't have those supports. So kind of hanging on with my seatbelt and realizing that, I am really important and you are really important. Jess, what surprised you the most then as someone who researches in this area or changed your expectations?
Sure. So even just thinking about that study, 8 times, that is substantial.
Hmm.
And in some ways, we often talk about adolescence as a time when youth are seeking peer support and gaining autonomy from their families and their parents and really want to spend less time with their
Hmm.
parents, which for sure that is a part of the developmental stage. However, in some ways, I'm not surprised that, parents have such that influence because of my work around trauma. And we know how critical that parental support is across the developmental span.
Hmm.
And so, it's not surprising, even though youth express it in different ways or don't express their gratitude or appreciation for that parental
Sure.
support,
Sure.
that quiet presence matters.
How about as a mom though? So like you do all this really amazing research, but what does that look like now that you're living
Yeah.
it for yourself?
Oh my goodness. It is every day is a different day. It's what surprises me most is how it works so differently for each kid, even within the same family structure. So I have 2 kids, and my older son, when he gets overwhelmed, he cries or he, gets tearful and just really, goes inward. My daughter is the opposite. Oh my goodness, when she gets overwhelmed, it's big, it's loud, it's outward. And it's just 2 different ways of coping, but that, we've learned, also requires different strategies and skills for helping them to regulate those emotions. So, my son wants, a cuddle or a hug, he comes towards us. My daughter, hand her a basketball and let her dribble, take a few shots, and that or a jump rope.
Yeah.
Those 2 things really help her work through it.
Well, if I can give you any advice, keep those stories now because we love at this stage in their 20s bringing back the examples of how they did things to us. So over the
Mhm.
years, like one that we'd like to talk about threw up in every swimming pool across the Eastern
Oh,
Seaboard at some
goodness.
point. So
Yes.
they're like, "That's great, mom." So keep those stories because they're great. And that brings us really to kind of wrap up idea one and the idea of the flexibility of what we've done with Feel Your Best Self, that you have choice among the ways that you can cope, the ways you can react, and those strategies, the Feel Your Best Self strategies should be based on your personal preferences, but you can use them lifelong. And so wrapping up that idea one, it's the importance of your emotion system is really the foundation, but that how it looks really different across ages and the things that you're doing are really important as a caregiver.
Great. Well, I think that's a great segue into idea 2 today, which is when you don't have the history. So that non-parent caregiver experience.
Sure.
And so, every day there's teachers and coaches who are meeting children mid-story. They don't have context for who this kid was last year. They don't have that relationship buffer when behavior surprises them. And so what happens sometimes is that dysregulation can be read as defiance or rudeness or
Hmm.
disrespect,
For sure.
on whether it's on the soccer field or, at music practice. And so one way I catch myself in those moments is saying, if it were easy, they would do it. And so there's something else going on here that's making it not easy for them.
Oh, that's a really cool way to take a beat and think about it. If it were easy, they would do it. So you're trying to be curious rather than judging what
Yeah,
what you're seeing. Huh. That's great. I mean, we talk about that. Um, becomes a lot easier to do that though, right? When you have a relationship building and you have a bank that's built up. So when you do need to redirect
for sure.
something that you're seeing happens, it's also part of supporting regulation. We talk a lot about this, or you see it, a 5-to-1 ratio, right, for
Hmm.
interactions. So we need 5 positives for every 1 redirect or negative that
Yeah,
comes their way, and it's really hard to
that's a
remember that, but it's really important to do that. And we know that those relationships are so critical. Teacher student relationship quality is a really important mechanism for kids' regulatory development in middle childhood, and teacher supported predicted emotion regulation and well-being. So it's not just doing what you need to say, what you want them to do in the moment, and not freaking out and
Right.
screaming. It's also about well-being over time. Just, do you have examples of that, like from your teaching or your coaching? Because you're a soccer coach now, right? A
That's
youth
right.
coach. That's
hmm
right.
Yeah, one that comes to mind is when I was teaching, I would always take a few minutes on Monday morning to let my students share something from their weekend.
Mm. I
And
bet you
it,
got some good shares.
oh, we got, yes. But over time, and I had small groups of students in the special ed setting. So it was, a little easier to do than a whole class wide. But over time, I really got to hear stories about their families. And more importantly to me, it was they saw me in the hallway and they followed up on that story, or I came into the classroom and they wanted to give me an update. And, that spoke to the relationship we had built. And it was just that little bit of curiosity about who they are beyond, um, in my classroom or in the academic sense that
It's like a
made a
real
big difference.
relationship bank that you're
Yeah.
building for sure. My favorite days when I was a practicing school psychologist was just playing Connect Four, right?
Mm,
We didn't do Monopoly because you would never
too
finish
long.
in the school day, right? But Connect Four was a great way to be, looking at the game and talking, but not feeling like you're
Not
not
confrontational, just, yeah.
confrontational, right? Um, for my grad students now, we love always going out and talking about our favorite ice cream. So like that's
Everyone
a
can
big
relate.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about coaching? You have examples from that? Because you don't have as much time to build relationships sometimes, right?
No, but it's like the simple little things when you bring the team together, everyone quickly sharing their favorite of something, ice cream, soccer player, etc. I
Hmm.
saw a peer coach doing shout outs to other kids at the end of the game last week. And so,
Cool.
what did everyone do well today? And just really having folks feel connected
Hmm.
and then participating yourself. So share your own favorite ice cream flavor, talk about your own life outside of that setting and let them get to know you too. That can really build that relational bank. And so, whatever that form that takes for you, it's going to help with emotion regulation and empathy when things don't go as planned
That's
with that
perfect.
kid.
And it's exactly, again, why Feel Your Best Self was designed to be used by anyone, to give a teacher, a coach, a parent skills and a language to notice what's going on with our kids and to explore together, right? And be curious to find a way that works to deal with those big feelings. So I think for idea two, the summary is really that regardless of the role you play as a caregiver, it's really important to think about your role in helping kids build skills and work together on recognizing, reflecting, and responding in ways that look different based on what's happening.
Absolutely.
Hmm. So I think that's a good wrap on two. Let's move to our third idea, or the third thing that we're thinking about today. Um, and that's the adult mindset shift, because I love how you talked about that before, about being curious rather than judgmental. So if we think about adults and the way you think about why is this happening, to instead, what does the kid need right now? That's part of what you're doing.
Hmm. That reminds me of the reframing we ask folks to do with trauma informed care, moving from frustration or annoyance about something
Hmm.
to curiosity about how we can support and move forward. Um, this isn't about lowering expectations or
Right.
removing consequences for behavior. I think that's a common misconception, but instead helping the child to navigate and regulate so that you can move forward together with any necessary repair or supports to prevent it in the future.
Hmm. So you mean basically when we're talking about co-regulation, it's not just like the parent and the kid, right? It's a
No,
family, it's a community level phenomenon.
absolutely.
And kind of FYBS, we use FYBS to give a common language around emotions. So consistent emotion naming wherever you are can kind of thread together all of the pieces to help it make it easier for kids to accelerate their development. Um, I love, I'm a big pop culture type of
hmm
person, and I like watching a lot of television. And I'm been more and more intrigued by how much emotion is coming into some of the stories. So particularly things like Shrinking. I think you watch
Yeah.
Shrinking too,
Yeah.
right? And in the most recent season, there was a comment where one of the teens said the word "sighted," which was a combination of being scared and excited, and that's like just super cool because you can hold both emotions together at the same time, and we're talking about it.
Absolutely. Just in the car yesterday, my daughter announced there's 8 days left of school. And I said, and she's finishing kindergarten. So, kind of a big year for her. And I said,
Milestone.
yeah. I said, are you feeling excited about that? Nervous about that? And she just kind of got quiet. And I said, maybe both, you know?
Yeah.
Both is very justified. And so we want children and adults to realize that we can hold multiple emotions simultaneously.
Right.
And so it's our job to model that naming.
The
And
naming.
We don't need to fix it. And
We
so
always want to fix it though, right?
I know
So
it's
that's where we have to stop.
yeah.
Okay.
And so the reframe for all caregivers is that, whether you're a parent, teacher, grandparent, coach, you're not supposed to prevent the big feelings. Your goal is to stay regulated enough to be present through them.
Oh, I love that ending. That's a good wrap to idea 3. And it's all about the adult mindset, the way adults think about kids' emotions. I think we should transition to questions from our audience. What do you think?
Let's do it.
You want to take the first one? What do you have?
Yeah, I'm really excited about these. Okay, so let's see. My daughter, almost 8, is in a huge attitude phase.
Attitude. Yep.
We ask her to do something. She looks at us directly and says no. She will mock us, roll her eyes, get really defiant. At school, you can guess this, she's the perfect angel.
Of course.
I know they say kids lash out at home where they feel the safest, but I'd love suggestions on how to manage the attitude.
The good old attitude. Parent of an 8-year-old. It's going to come back again, first of all. But so let's first talk about, so at 8, we're talking about middle childhood. Yes. And let's normalize what that means for the emotion system, right? So at this age, we're dealing with increasing awareness of social rules and consequences if you get something wrong, right?
Definitely.
So there's a whole new kind of cognitive load happening on your brain around big feelings that are coming because of that. You're kind of sort all this stuff out. So, I think emotion regulation, again, is the foundation that everything else is built on in this window, and that just normalize that the child's working hard. I'm thinking actually about a story that when he had a babysitter years and years ago who was became a super close family member. But at one point I came home from the day and she said, well, I know I'm part of the family now. Your daughter spit on me and told me she didn't want to do something. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I got really embarrassed, of course, about it. But she was taking it as, hey, this is where she is in her childhood space right now. And
trust me enough to let me see it.
And trusted me enough to see it. There was a relationship bank.
Yeah.
What would you do, Jess, or recommend?
I think with your daughter, you want to set boundaries about what's acceptable and stick to them. So you could try the strategy of saying, try again in a really neutral tone.
Try again.
And so she says, something inappropriate or rolls her eyes, and you just say, try again. And you're prompting her to respond more appropriately. I think you also want to try to spend some one-on-one time with her where she gets to lead the play or activity or choose the shared space to build up some of those positive interactions to support you in those tougher moments.
And choice is really important, right?
Yes.
So that there isn't a threat or there isn't a demand. It's just doing, right?
Yeah, by her lead.
Yeah. Because then if you have those calmer moments, so in calmer moments, you could try asking gently, if you would respond that way with your teacher, which we know she doesn't because the parent said that she's a perfect angel, right?
Yeah.
Or a coach. And so part of that is just conversations around working to build self-awareness of how the behavior affects other people.
Yeah.
So 8-year-old parent, remember this is just a phase and you can model your own regulation by not getting louder and reactive. The better you can do that, the better the outcome will be as you hit the next phase.
Yeah, hang in there.
All right, let's move to question 2. Let's see. It's I coach high school lacrosse How do I help kids that are so hard on themselves it's getting in the way of their performance? What do
Yes.
you think, Jess?
So, yeah, sometimes the disappointment about our performance can motivate us to work harder, but other times it can get in the way of us taking risks or being able to focus or perform well. I think that's what this coach is seeing.
Huh. Yeah. And so, what coaches can actually do is, again, this idea of naming what you're observing without judging, right?
Hmm.
So, you seemed really overwhelmed out there. What was happening? You know,
Sure. Yeah.
sometimes it happens. And build in the ability to do those brief regulation moments before these high pressure situations. And we think about um, how we respond to things like doing belly breathing or a shake out the yuck can
Mm.
work for teens. Those
Yeah.
are feel your best self strategies can work for teens just as well. Or I'm thinking about my son who is a collegiate athlete and just about a month ago or so had come out of a meet and uh, didn't perform the way he wanted him to
Okay.
be, but was able to do a strategy that we call turn the dial and think about, um, boy, at last year at this time, I couldn't have adjusted and gotten to this result, even if it wasn't the ultimate result that I really
Wow.
wanted. And so that was a
That's
big
amazing.
step, right?
Yeah.
In movement toward being able to like appraise the situation or
Yeah.
and think about your regulation.
It's fantastic. Nice, really nice perspective taking and reflection. And so coaches might feel like they weren't trained for this or it's outside their role. And, they probably weren't trained
Hmm.
for it.
Yeah.
But emotional readiness is really a big part of athletic readiness, like you just modeled
Hmm.
from your son. And so to be a successful coach, we really do think it is part of your role.
Yeah. So again, you're at a different age of coaching because you're a youth soccer coach. So
Yes.
what does that look like in your space? Do you have an example?
Yeah, I think in the younger kids, I see them deferring to others. A lot of them talk about, who's the best on the team or who's good on the team, and
Mhm.
kind of sitting themselves out. And so, really trying to encourage that we're all part of the team. You know, we all make valuable contributions, and we're all, it's equal playing time at their age, and that's how we all improve,
Mhm.
and we're here to have fun together.
Isn't that the saying isn't that the saying there is no I in team, right? That
That's
we
for
say,
sure.
but
Yep.
but actually putting that in place we is really important. And I've been to a lot of athletic events
Hmm.
across three kids with both good and bad moments that I've seen. And what I would say is it's definitely the coaches who see their role as part of kids' emotion system,
Hmm.
their role in that, as part of their role that really stands out. Um, I think that's a good wrap on our questions, and we turn it back to the audience to say, "Bring us more. We'd be happy to answer them." And
That sounds great.
you think? All
Yes.
right, let's close it out. So we're down to the one takeaway to feel your best self. So for the final part of this podcast, um, I guess I would say to name one feeling you're seeing in a child right now. Just name it out loud without jumping in to fix it.
Mm.
Do you have an example?
Sure. Um, so recently, another example from my daughter, she's 3 or 4 years younger than her brother. So he's starting to, be able to stay home alone for short periods of time, have a little more independence. And, I think or I've seen that she's disappointed about that or even
Mhm.
jealous. And so I know as a parent, this one's a little easier not to try to fix because I'm not going to leave her home alone. Um, but just to name, I see that
Yep.
you're feeling disappointed. And, I don't have to justify it, rationalize it. Just name it.
Hmm. By the way, those examples still apply to the 20s, except with the
Bigger
3, there's
things.
always something, right? So yeah, definitely. That's a great job to just recognize. That's the first step to figuring out what to do and what you should do. And that's why the feel your best self tools can be helpful, and using that feelings forecast in particular to give an anchor to find a language that fits based on the ages that you're working with.
Hmm.
So we start with like just clouds. I'm feeling heavy and stormy and I'm feeling light and fluffy. Like, but then you can build the words in over time. So I think that's a really great place to start.
Yeah.
That's a good way to end our first episode. Something super simple.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of episode 1, and I think that's a great place to end it. The idea that, big feelings are not a sign that something is wrong. It's just a sign that the developing system is doing its job. And your job as the caregiver is to stay regulated enough to meet it.
And that job looks the same whether you're a parent, a teacher, or a coach. You're working within a different context, but it's that same emotion system.
That's right. But as caregivers, certainly nobody warned us about any of this.
No, now you're warned.
We'll see you next time on the FYBS Playbook.
Every day you feel a million things, but I promise that it all will be okay. I'll think of you and what you do, you will find your way. Feel your best self.